Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime was bigger than any human city, and it sparkled with lights from a dozen different alien civilizations. After 200 years of trying, humans had finally built ships that could travel faster than light, and now they were here to meet the Galaxy. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez checked her formal dress uniform one more time. She carried Earth's application for membership in the Galactic Council in a simple metal case. Inside were records of human art, music, science, and exploration. Everything that made humanity special was written on those pages. She hoped it would be enough. The docking bay was enormous and filled with ships from across the galaxy. Some looked like crystals, others moved like liquid metal, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy. The human ship looked plain and simple. Next to them, Jake felt a knot in his stomach as alien workers stared at their vessel with what looked like amusement. Commander Ben Carter walked beside Lisa as they made their way through corridors that stretched higher than any building on Earth. The walls showed moving pictures of great alien achievements. Massive cities that floated in space, stars that had been moved to new locations, and entire planets that had been built from nothing. Ben wondered what humans had accomplished that could compare to any of this. The council chamber was a vast dome, filled with representatives from 12 different species. High Arbiter Veltar of the Zephyrians stood 20 feet tall, and his body was made of living crystal that caught and scattered light in beautiful patterns. The Nexari ambassador was a serpent-like creature whose scales shifted colors as she moved. The Cathara delegate looked like a giant insect with wings that buzzed softly when she was thinking. Lisa stepped forward and placed the application case on the speaking platform. Her voice echoed in the huge chamber as she began to explain what humanity had achieved. She talked about human art that captured the beauty of emotion and human music that could make people cry or laugh or feel hope. She described human science that had unlocked the secrets of atoms and stars. She mentioned human exploration that had taken them from caves to the surface of their moon and now to the stars themselves. The aliens listened politely, but Jake could see something wrong in their faces. The Zephyrian's crystal body was making small chiming sounds that seemed to be laughter. The Nexari ambassador's tail was twitching in a way that showed amusement. Even the serious Kithara was clicking her mandibles in what looked like barely controlled mirth. High Arbiter Veltar spoke first, and his voice was like the sound of wind chimes in a storm. He pointed out that humans had taken over 200,000 years to develop faster than light travel, while most council species had done it in 50,000 years or less. The other aliens nodded and made their own sounds of agreement. The Nexari ambassador hissed that humans still used chemical rockets and nuclear weapons, which she called primitive toys. Dr. Helen Brooks sat in the observer section and took careful notes. She was Earth's leading expert on alien life, and she had spent years preparing for this moment. Now she watched as every argument the humans made was dismissed with casual cruelty. When Lisa mentioned human medical advances that had eliminated most diseases, the Kithara delegate buzzed that such things were basic achievements that any intelligent species should accomplish quickly. The worst moment came when Ben tried to explain human military capabilities. He described how humans had learned to work together and fight as one people instead of many tribes. The entire chamber erupted in what could only be described as laughter. The sounds were different for each species, but the meaning was clear. The idea that humans could be any kind of threat was the funniest thing the aliens had heard in years. Hi. Arbiter Veltar gestured for silence and delivered the council's decision. Humanity would be granted probationary observer status, which meant they could watch but not participate in galactic affairs. They were forbidden from establishing colonies beyond their own solar system and would need to prove their worth through Simple tasks like mining asteroids and cleaning waste from established council worlds. The alien laughter followed them as they walked back to their ship. Jake's hands were shaking with anger, but he kept his voice steady as he gave orders to prepare for departure. Lisa stared out the window at the alien ships and wondered how long it would take for humanity to prove they were wrong. Ben was already thinking about Earth's military and whether there was any way to prepare for what he felt was coming. Dr. Brooks finished her notes and closed her tablet. She had recorded every insult, every dismissive gesture, and every moment of alien arrogance. Somewhere in all that data might be the key to understanding their enemies better, because that was what they were now, whether the Council realized it or not. The aliens had made a terrible mistake today. They had humiliated humanity in front of the entire galaxy, and humans had long memories for that kind of treatment. The journey back to Earth would take 3 weeks, and Jake knew it would be the longest 3 weeks of his life. How do you tell an entire planet that their dreams of joining the galactic community had been crushed? How do you explain that humanity was now considered little more than cosmic janitors? The answers would have to wait, but one thing was certain. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. 5 years had passed since the humiliation at Nexus Prime and Earth had become exactly what the Council wanted: a source of cheap labor and raw materials. Admiral Frank Hughes watched another convoy of human ships depart for the asteroid belts, carrying workers who would spend months breaking apart rocks for alien masters. The pay was barely enough to survive and the conditions were dangerous, but it was the only work the Council allowed. On mining station, Terran Hope Chief Engineer Casey Thompson wiped sweat from her forehead as she tried to repair another broken drill. The Zephyrians provided equipment that was just good enough to keep humans working, but never good enough to make the job safe or easy. 3 miners had died this week when their tunnel collapsed, and the alien overseer had simply marked it down as acceptable losses. The quotas kept getting higher, but the tools kept getting older. Casey knew that every human mining operation was running on borrowed time. The aliens didn't care if humans lived or died as long as the raw materials kept flowing. She had started keeping secret records of every safety violation and every preventable death. Someday someone might want to know the real cost of Earth's so-called membership in Galactic Society. Dr. Patricia Wells stood in her laboratory on Mars and stared at equations that could change everything. Officially, she was studying mineral processing techniques, but her real work was hidden behind false walls and encrypted computers. The Council had forbidden humans from developing certain technologies, but they had made a crucial mistake. They assumed humans would obey rules just because aliens made them. Her team included some of the brightest minds Earth had ever produced. Dr. Ryan Foster worked on quantum mechanics that could punch holes through any known defense. Engineer Linda Hayes designed weapons that looked like mining equipment but could tear apart spacecraft. They met in secret, shared their discoveries through coded messages, and slowly built technologies that the galaxy had never seen before. On Earth, President Angela Scott faced angry crowds every day. Former Marine Colonel Steve Parker led protests that demanded an end to human servitude. The images from Europa were still fresh in everyone's mind. A Nexari patrol ship had destroyed a transport carrying 3,000 colonists and claimed they had violated restricted airspace. No apology, no compensation, just a cold statement that inferior species must learn boundaries through consequences. Captain Jake Morrison had arrived at the wreckage site with his small escort fleet, but it was too late to save most of the people. He managed to rescue 847 survivors from the debris field, but the rest were gone. Families torn apart, children killed for the crime of being human. The footage of bodies floating in space had spread across Earth's networks and changed everything. Commander Alex Turner worked in the shadows building an intelligence network that reached across the solar system. His agents included former soldiers, like Sergeant Rick Coleman and Lieutenant Maria Santos, who now worked as civilian contractors but remembered their military training. They documented alien patrol patterns, studied council ship designs, and slowly mapped every weakness they could find. The aliens were powerful, but they had grown soft after centuries of unchallenged rule. Their ships were built for show rather than combat. Their crews had never faced real opposition, and their tactics hadn't changed in generations. Turner's people gathered this information piece by piece and stored it in hidden databases that grew larger every month. Admiral Hughes began converting civilian ships for military use, but he had to be careful. The work was disguised as industrial upgrades and safety improvements. Cargo haulers gained reinforced hulls that could carry hidden weapons. Passenger ships received improved engines that could outrun most alien vessels. Mining platforms were modified to serve as mobile bases that could disappear into asteroid fields. Dr. Wells made her biggest breakthrough on a cold Tuesday morning when she successfully tested a quantum tunnel weapon that could bypass energy shields. The device was small enough to fit on a fighter craft, but powerful enough to damage the largest alien ships. She immediately began work on larger versions while her team started designing delivery systems. The key was patience and secrecy. Every human installation in the solar system was being slowly converted for war, but the aliens noticed nothing. They were too busy counting profits from human labor and too confident in their own superiority to imagine that their servants might be preparing to fight back. Colonel Parker's resistance movement grew stronger as more people joined the cause. They trained in abandoned mines and empty space stations, learning how to fight in zero gravity and low atmosphere. Most were civilians who had never held weapons before, but they learned quickly because they had something the aliens lacked. They had reasons to fight that went beyond duty or orders. Commander Turner's intelligence network discovered something crucial during a raid on a council database. The alien military had detailed files on dozens of species they had conquered, but the human file was almost empty. They knew nothing about human history, human psychology, or human capabilities in warfare. To them, humans were just another weak species that had been easily defeated. The massacre at Europa became the turning point that changed everything. President Scott authorized Operation Phoenix, a secret military buildup that would prepare humanity for the war everyone knew was coming. The plan was ambitious and dangerous, but it was also necessary. The aliens had made their position clear. Humans would serve or they would die. Admiral Hughes coordinated the effort from a hidden command center in the asteroid belt. Ships were converted, weapons were manufactured, and soldiers were trained all under the noses of alien overseers who saw only obedient workers. The mining crews that broke apart asteroids during the day spent their nights installing missile launchers and particle cannons. Captain Morrison led reconnaissance missions disguised as routine patrols. His crew mapped council fleet positions and defensive installations while pretending to escort cargo ships. Navigator Lucy Chun plotted courses that would allow human ships to strike quickly and disappear before the aliens could respond. Weapons. Officer Pete Williams tested targeting systems on abandoned hulks while claiming to clear navigation hazards. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not the weak servants the Council believed them to be. Hidden throughout the solar system, millions of people prepared for a war that would reshape the galaxy. They had been laughed at, mocked, and dismissed, but they had also been underestimated. Soon the aliens would discover that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat. The massacre at Europa became the spark that lit a fire across the solar system. In hidden facilities scattered from Mercury to Pluto, human ingenuity turned toward weapons of war. Dr. Patricia Wells stood in her secret laboratory watching the final test of her quantum tunnel torpedo. The weapon phased through solid matter and emerged inside its target, where it could bypass any known shield. Technology. Her team had worked for months to perfect the design. The torpedo looked like a standard mining charge, but its quantum core could punch through the hull of any council ship. Ryan Foster had solved the targeting problem by creating a guidance system that locked onto specific energy signatures. Linda Hayes had designed the warhead to cause maximum damage to alien ship systems while remaining undetectable until the moment of impact. Colonel Steve Parker's resistance movement had grown beyond anything the aliens could imagine. Training camps operated on remote asteroids where former soldiers taught civilians how to fight in space. Sergeant Rick Coleman ran hand-to-hand combat courses in zero gravity, while Lieutenant Maria Santos taught tactics that emphasize speed and surprise over brute force. The human approach to warfare was different from anything the Council had seen before. Alien species fought with rigid formations and overwhelming firepower, but humans adapted constantly. They used asteroid fields for cover, turned mining equipment into weapons, and coordinated attacks with precision that came from centuries of warfare. On Earth. Chief Engineer Casey Thompson's mining crews had become saboteurs without the aliens realizing it. Every cargo ship that left human space now carried hidden weapon systems. Missile tubes were disguised as storage compartments, and particle cannons looked like communication arrays. The aliens inspected the ships regularly, but they never found anything suspicious, because they didn't know what to look for. Commander Alex Turner's intelligence network had infiltrated Council facilities throughout the galaxy. Agent Dana Cole worked as a translator at Nexus Prime and copied classified military documents. Specialist Tim Brooks maintained computer systems for the Zephyrians and planted viruses that would activate when needed. The aliens trusted humans to do menial work and never suspected they were being spied on. The intelligence they gathered revealed crucial weaknesses in the Council military. Their ships were powerful but slow, designed for intimidating enemies rather than fighting agile opponents. Their crews had no experience with real combat because they had faced no serious challenges for centuries. Most importantly, their tactics hadn't evolved in generations because they had never needed to adapt. Admiral Frank Hughes coordinated the military buildup from his command center hidden inside a mining platform. Operation Phoenix was transforming the entire solar system into a fortress, but the work had to be done carefully. Every modification was disguised as industrial equipment, and every weapon was hidden where alien inspectors would never think to look. The converted ships were marvels of human engineering. Cargo haulers became heavy cruisers with armor plating disguised as radiation shielding. Passenger transports were modified to carry fighter squadrons in what appeared to be expanded cargo holds. Even the smallest mining shuttles now mounted weapons that could threaten alien patrol craft. Dr. Wells achieved another breakthrough when she successfully tested a gravitational weapon that could create artificial gravity wells. The device was mounted on a converted research vessel, and during testing it crushed a derelict alien ship like an empty can. The technology was scaled up immediately and installed on humanity's largest converted warships. President Angela Scott maintained diplomatic relations with the Council while secretly authorizing ever more aggressive preparations. She met with alien ambassadors and smiled while they delivered new demands for increased production quotas. Behind the scenes, she approved budgets for weapons research and signed orders that converted entire industrial facilities to military production. Plan required perfect timing and absolute secrecy. Captain Jake Morrison led reconnaissance missions that mapped every Council installation in human space. His crew aboard the disguised freighter Defiance gathered intelligence that would be crucial when the fighting began. Navigator Lucy Chun plotted attack routes that would allow human forces to strike multiple targets simultaneously. Weapons Officer Pete Williams tested new targeting systems by claiming to practice defensive maneuvers. The aliens watched human ships conduct what appeared to be training exercises and never realized they were actually rehearsing coordinated attacks. Every drill brought human forces closer to perfection while the Council remained oblivious to the growing threat. The resistance movement spread to every human settlement in the solar system. Mining stations became fortresses equipped with hidden defensive systems. Space habitats were modified to serve as military bases that could support large fleets. Even civilian transports carried weapons and trained crews ready to join the fight. When the time came, Colonel Parker's forces practiced boarding actions using derelict ships as targets. The aliens believed humans were simply clearing space debris, but the exercises taught valuable lessons about fighting inside alien vessels. Human soldiers learned to move through corridors designed for different species and to disable systems they had never seen before. The breakthrough in quantum communication technology allowed instant coordination across the solar system. Dr. Wells' team developed transmitters that were hidden in routine equipment and used frequencies the aliens couldn't detect. Orders could be sent to every human ship and station simultaneously without the Council intercepting the signals. Turner's intelligence network discovered the Council's greatest weakness during a raid on their central database. The aliens had detailed psychological profiles for every species they ruled, but their file on humans was almost empty. They knew nothing about human history, human motivations, or human capabilities in warfare. They had dismissed humanity so completely that they never bothered to study their new subjects. The aliens were about to pay for their arrogance with blood. Hidden throughout the solar system, hundreds of converted warships waited for the order to attack. Millions of trained personnel stood ready to shed their masks of servitude and reveal themselves as soldiers. Revolutionary weapons technology lay concealed behind false panels and innocent-looking equipment. Admiral Hughes reviewed the final preparations as the date for Operation Phoenix approached. Every human ship in space had been modified for combat. Every station and habitat was armed and ready. The mining fleets that had served alien masters for 5 years were about to become the deadliest force the galaxy had ever seen. The Council still viewed humans as obedient servants who would never dare to resist their betters. They were about to learn that humans had spent those 5 years of servitude preparing for war. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology, but their absolute refusal to remain slaves. The moment arrived on a Tuesday morning when the Council announced their final solution for the human problem. High Arbiter Valtaris' message broadcast across all human settlements with the cold certainty of absolute power. Humanity would be relocated to a single planet under permanent alien supervision because they had proven too unpredictable to remain in their birth system. Admiral Frank Hughes received the message in his hidden command center and immediately activated Operation Phoenix. Across the solar system, sleeper cells awakened and shed their disguises. Mining ships revealed weapon systems that had been hidden for years. Cargo haulers dropped their false hulls to expose the warships beneath. The transformation was immediate and total. The first targets were the Council monitoring stations that watched human activities. Captain Jake Morrison led the attack on the Nexary command post orbiting Jupiter. His ship, the Retribution, looked like a simple freight hauler until its cargo bays opened to reveal missile launchers and particle beam arrays. The alien crew had seconds to realize their mistake before quantum. Torpedoes tore through their shields and hull. Colonel Steve Parker's ground forces launched simultaneous assaults on Council garrisons throughout the system. His troops had trained for years in secret, and now they moved with deadly precision. The aliens had grown complacent after 5 years of human obedience, and their security was designed to keep servants in line, not to stop an organized military assault. The battle for Titan became the first test of human military doctrine against alien technology. Parker led 3,000 Marines in an attack on the Council's largest base outside Earth orbit. The aliens had energy shields and plasma weapons, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. Human soldiers used mining charges as improvised explosives and turned construction equipment into assault vehicles. They moved through maintenance tunnels that alien architects had never considered as attack routes. Most importantly, they coordinated their efforts with communication systems the aliens couldn't detect or jam. Dr. Patricia Wells watched from the bridge of the research vessel Innovation as her quantum weapons proved their worth in real combat. The torpedoes phased through alien shields as if they didn't exist and emerged inside enemy ships where they caused devastating internal explosions. Zephyrian crystal ships that had seemed invincible shattered like glass when their molecular structure was disrupted. The aliens tried to respond with overwhelming force, but their tactics were centuries out of date. They formed rigid battle lines and advanced in predetermined patterns, while human ships used asteroid fields for cover and struck from unexpected angles. The Council fleet commanders had never faced an enemy that ignored conventional space combat. Commander Alex Turner coordinated intelligence operations from his position aboard Admiral Hughes' flagship. His network of agents had spent years mapping alien weaknesses, and now that information became weapons. Human forces knew exactly where to strike. Council ships to disable their engines, where to hit their communication arrays, and how to trigger cascading system failures. Agent Dana Cole activated sleeper programs in the Council's own computer networks that caused chaos in their command structure. False orders were sent to alien ships directing them away from human targets. Navigation systems failed at crucial moments, sending Council vessels into asteroid fields or on collision courses with their own allies. The battle for Earth's orbital platforms showcased human tactical innovation at its finest. 12 Council installations fell in coordinated strikes that lasted less than an hour. Each attack was perfectly timed to prevent the aliens from coordinating their defenses or calling for reinforcements. Engineer Casey Thompson led the assault on the main processing station, where human workers had been forced to refine raw materials for alien use. Her team of former miners knew every corridor and maintenance shaft in the facility. They moved through the station like ghosts appearing where the aliens least expected them. The space battle above Earth became a masterpiece of human engineering and courage. Ships that had hauled cargo for years revealed themselves as heavy cruisers, with firepower that matched anything in the Council fleet. Fighter squadrons launched from converted passenger transports and swarmed alien vessels with coordinated attacks. Captain Morrison's tactical officer, Pete Williams, demonstrated the effectiveness of human targeting systems by destroying 3 Nexari destroyers in rapid succession. The aliens had superior shields and armor, but their ships were designed for intimidation rather than maneuverability. Human weapons could track and hit targets that alien gunners couldn't even see. Dr. Wells deployed her gravitational manipulation technology for the first time in actual combat. The prototype weapon created localized gravity wells that crushed entire squadrons of enemy ships. The aliens had no defense against weapons that attacked the fundamental forces of physics rather than their conventional shields and armor. News of the human uprising spread through galactic communication networks faster than the Council could contain it. Species across the galaxy watched in amazement as the servants they had dismissed as primitives destroyed fleet after fleet of supposedly superior alien warships. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. For centuries, The Council had maintained power through the belief that their technology made them invincible. Now humans were proving that superior tactics and determination could overcome any technological advantage. High Arbiter Veltar himself took command of the emergency response fleet, but found himself facing an enemy that defied every prediction. Human ships appeared where sensors said. Empty space existed, struck without warning, and vanished before counterattacks could be launched. The rigid formations that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia became death traps against human mobility. The Council's Fifth Fleet received emergency orders to proceed to the Sol system and crush the rebellion before it could spread. 847 ships representing the combined military might of 6 alien species prepared for what they believed would be a simple police action against uppity servants. Admiral Hughes smiled as he received intelligence reports about the approaching fleet. The aliens still didn't understand what they were facing. They thought this was a simple revolt that could be crushed with superior numbers and firepower. They had no idea that humanity had spent 5 years preparing for exactly this moment. The stage was set for the largest space battle in galactic history. On one side stood the established order backed by millennia of unchallenged dominance. On the other stood humanity armed with revolutionary technology, unorthodox tactics, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy was about to learn which force was truly stronger. The Council's Fifth Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, expecting to face scattered human resistance. Instead, they found Admiral Frank Hughes waiting with a defensive grid that had been 5 years in the making. The asteroid belt had been transformed into the largest military installation in known space, with weapons platforms hidden among the rocky debris. High Arbiter Veltar commanded the fleet from his flagship Eternal Dominion, a crystal ship the size of a city that had never been damaged in 3 centuries of service. He studied the tactical displays with growing confusion as his sensors detected far more human ships than intelligence reports had suggested possible. The primitives seemed to have an entire fleet hidden among the asteroids. Captain Jake Morrison led the first wave of human ships out of their concealment with perfect timing. The Retribution and 50 converted cargo haulers accelerated toward the alien vanguard, using the asteroids for cover. Their weapons remained hidden until the last possible moment, when cargo bay doors opened to reveal missile launchers and particle beam arrays. The alien response was immediate but predictable. Council ships formed defensive formations that had worked for centuries against conventional enemies. They never expected human vessels to split apart mid-flight, revealing that what appeared to be single large ships were actually clusters of smaller craft flying in tight formation. Chief Engineer Casey Thompson watched from her command position aboard the mining platform, turned Fortress Deep Strike as her converted drilling rigs opened fire on alien cruisers. The weapons looked like industrial equipment because they were industrial equipment, modified to channel quantum energy instead of breaking apart asteroids. The aliens had inspected these platforms countless times without realizing they were looking at camouflaged weapons. Dr. Patricia Wells coordinated the quantum mine deployment from her laboratory ship Innovation. The mines were invisible to alien sensors until they activated, creating spatial distortions that trapped enemy vessels in crushing gravitational fields. Entire squadrons of Council ships found themselves unable to maneuver as space itself became a weapon against them. Colonel Steve Parker's Marine forces prepared for the boarding actions that would decide the battle. His troops had trained extensively in zero-gravity combat and alien ship layouts. They launched from converted mining shuttles that looked harmless until they clamped onto enemy hulls and began cutting through armored plating with industrial tools turned into weapons. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt lasted 3 days and reshaped every assumption about space combat. Human forces used tactics that baffled their enemies, appearing where sensors said nothing existed and striking from angles that conventional doctrine said were impossible. The aliens had superior individual ships, but humans fought as a coordinated swarm that overwhelmed isolated targets. Commander Alex Turner's intelligence network proved its worth as sleeper agents activated programs hidden in Council computer systems. Navigation data was corrupted, causing alien ships to collide with asteroids or each other. Communication systems failed at crucial moments, leaving Council commanders unable to coordinate their forces. The turning point came when Han Council commanders unable to coordinate their forces. The turning point came when Colonel Parker's Marines successfully boarded and captured the Nexari heavy cruiser Serpent's Fang. The sight of human soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors of an alien warship sent shockwaves through the Council fleet. These were supposed to be primitive servants, not trained warriors capable of taking their most advanced vessels. High Arbiter Veltar ordered his flagship forward to restore alien morale, but found himself facing Captain Morrison in a direct confrontation. The Retribution was a quarter the size of Eternal Dominion, but it moved with an agility that the massive Crystal ship couldn't match. Morrison used the asteroid field like a three-dimensional maze, leading the alien flagship into increasingly dangerous positions. Dr. Wells deployed her most secret weapon when the alien fleet attempted to regroup. The gravitational cascade device created a chain reaction that disabled dozens of Council ships without destroying them. The aliens watched in horror as their vessels were crushed by forces they couldn't understand or counter. Agent Dana Cole struck at the perfect moment, releasing a virus that crashed the Council's entire tactical network. Alien ships found themselves blind and deaf, unable to coordinate attacks or share intelligence. Human forces exploited the chaos with surgical strikes that picked apart the confused enemy formations. The psychological impact of the battle spread far beyond the solar system. Across the galaxy, subject species watched as humans proved that the Council was not invincible. The Kithara began secret negotiations with Earth through hidden channels. The Zephyrians faced riots on their homeworld as oppressed populations demanded their own liberation. Thompson's mining crews turned their industrial expertise into devastating effectiveness against alien ships. They knew exactly where to strike crystal vessels to cause structural failures and how to overload energy systems using techniques learned from years of dangerous work. The aliens had taught humans to be efficient, and now that efficiency was turned against them. The final phase of the battle saw Admiral Hughes deploy his reserve fleet of converted passenger liners. These ships had been modified to carry massive numbers of fighters that swarmed the remaining Council vessels. The aliens had no answer for the coordinated attacks of hundreds of small craft working together. High Arbiter Veltar made his last stand when human Marines breached his flagship. The Crystal being wielded personal weapons that channeled stellar energy, but found himself facing Commander Turner in single combat. The human officer had studied Zephyrian physiology for years and knew exactly how to shatter the aliens' crystalline structure. The destruction of Eternal Dominion marked the end of Council supremacy in the solar system. The surviving alien ships retreated in disorder while human forces consolidated their positions. News of the victory spread through quantum communication networks faster than the aliens could suppress it. President Angela Scott addressed the galaxy from Earth with a message that would reshape interstellar politics. She offered terms that were generous but firm. The Council would be dissolved and replaced by a galactic federation with humanity as the leading member. Species that accepted human leadership would be protected and prospered, while those that refused would face the consequences. The galaxy trembled as reports came in from across known space. Human sleeper agents were activating on dozens of worlds, revealing that Earth's influence had spread far beyond the solar system. The species that had laughed at humanity 5 years earlier now faced the reality that their former servants had become their new masters. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted permanently. Humanity had proven that technological superiority meant nothing without the will to use it effectively. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not just fighters but builders, who could create something better than what had come before. The final confrontation took place at Nexus Prime, where the Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Admiral Frank Hughes led a combined human fleet of over 2,000 ships toward the massive space station that represented everything humanity had been denied. The defenders included vessels from all 12 Council species, but their unity was fracturing as news of human victories spread across the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the dreadnought Vengeance, a converted cargo hauler that now mounted weapons capable of cracking planets. His crew were veterans of dozens of battles who had learned to fight with the efficiency that came from knowing their cause was just. Around him flew ships that had once carried human workers to mines and factories, but now served as instruments of liberation. The station's defenses were ancient but powerful, designed to repel any conventional attack. Energy barriers surrounded Nexus Prime like layers of an onion, while defensive platforms bristled with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The Council had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten how to actually fight a determined enemy. Dr. Patricia Wells aboard the Innovation prepared to deploy her latest creation. The quantum cascade weapon could disable entire sections of the station without destroying them completely. The goal was not annihilation but demonstration, showing the Council that humanity had surpassed them not just in warfare but in restraint and precision. High Arbiter Veltar had been replaced by his successor after the disaster at the asteroid belt, but the new leader was no more prepared for human tactics than the old one had been. The Zephyrians still believed that superior technology would triumph over human cunning. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. The assault began with Commander Alex Turner's intelligence operatives activating sleeper programs throughout the station. Life support systems failed in non-critical areas while transportation networks shut down, leaving alien defenders stranded. The Council had allowed humans to maintain their infrastructure for years, never realizing they were placing weapons inside their most secure facility. Colonel Steve Parker led 10,000 Marines in the boarding action that would become legend. His troops launched from shuttles disguised as maintenance craft and cut through hull plating with tools originally designed for asteroid mining. The diverse Council forces, each with their own combat doctrine, failed to coordinate effectively. Against human adaptability, the space battle around Nexus Prime showcased 5 years of human innovation. Ships that had once hauled cargo now moved with the precision of a ballet, coordinating attacks that struck enemy vessels at their weakest points. The aliens had superior individual ships, but humans fought as a unified force that overwhelmed isolated targets. Chief Engineer Casey Thompson's mining expertise proved invaluable as her teams identified structural weaknesses in the station's construction. The aliens had built Nexus Prime to impress rather than to withstand siege. Critical systems were exposed and poorly protected because the Council had never imagined anyone would dare attack their seat of power. Dr. Wells deployed her gravitational weapons with surgical precision, targeting only military installations, while leaving civilian areas untouched. The quantum cascade effect spread through the station's power grid, causing system failures that paralyzed defensive networks. The aliens watched helplessly as their most advanced technology was turned against them. Agent Dana Cole and her team seized the station's communication center, broadcasting human terms across the galaxy. Subject species on 100 worlds heard President Angela Scott's voice offering them freedom from Council oppression. The psychological impact was immediate as rebellion sparked on planets that had been peaceful for centuries. The fighting through Nexus Prime's corridors was brutal but one-sided. Human soldiers had trained for years to fight in alien environments, while the Council forces had grown soft from centuries of unchallenged rule. Battles that should have lasted hours ended in minutes as human tactical superiority proved decisive. Captain Morrison's ship weapons specialist Pete Williams demonstrated the effectiveness of human targeting systems by disabling the station's main reactor without causing a meltdown. The precision required was incredible, but human computer systems had been designed by people who understood that. Sometimes showing restraint was more powerful than displaying raw force. High Arbiter Veltar II made his final stand in this council chambers surrounded by the artifacts of 3 millennia of alien rule. He faced Commander Turner in single combat, wielding personal weapons that channeled the power of stars. The human officer had studied every aspect of Zephyrian physiology and knew exactly how to exploit their crystalline structure's natural resonance frequency. The symbolic importance of the victory could not be overstated. In the same chamber where humanity had been mocked and dismissed, human soldiers now stood victorious. The alien delegates who had once laughed at human achievements were forced to listen as President Scott outlined the terms of their surrender. The new order would be built on principles of cooperation rather than domination. The Galactic Federation would include all species as equals, with representation based on contribution rather than conquest. Those who accepted human leadership would find themselves part of something greater than what had existed before. Dr. Wells' technology was shared freely with former enemies as a demonstration of human intentions. The quantum weapons that had proven so devastating in warfare were adapted for peaceful purposes. Mining operations became more efficient. Medical treatments advanced and transportation improved as human innovation spread throughout the galaxy. Colonel Parker's Marines became peacekeepers rather than conquerors, helping to maintain order as the transition proceeded. The soldiers who had fought so hard for human freedom now ensured that other species could enjoy the same liberation. It was a responsibility they embraced with the same dedication they had shown in battle. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Mining stations became shipyards where humans and aliens worked together to build vessels for exploration rather than exploitation. Research facilities that had once served human oppressors became universities where knowledge was shared freely. Among all species. Admiral Hughes stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the first mixed crew exploration vessel prepare for departure. Humans and aliens worked side by side as equals, pursuing the dream of discovery that had always driven both species. The galaxy stretched before them, full of mysteries waiting to be solved. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral Morrison, commanded the new exploration fleet. His ship carried representatives from a dozen species, all united in the goal of pushing beyond known space to discover what lay in the vast unexplored regions of the galaxy. The old barriers between species were dissolving as cooperation replaced competition. The final scene showed President Scott addressing the inaugural session of the Galactic Federation. Representatives from hundreds of worlds listened as she outlined humanity's vision for the future. The species that had once laughed at human dreams now followed human leadership toward a destiny none of them could have imagined alone. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not proving they could fight, but proving they could build something better than what had come before. The galaxy had been remade in the image of human ideals, and the future stretched ahead bright with promise for all who chose to embrace it.